I just want you to know that I am 18, and I have had sex with older women before. It was topical, it was erotic, I gave it a 9.5, I still got wood. Still, I gave it a 10. A 10, a fucking 10. Gentlemen.
If you're gonna play the game,
you gotta act the part.
Howdy, I'm your host, Anna Renfro, joined by my boyfriend and co-host, Hunter.
How's it going?
So today, we're going to be talking about the 1999 film Varsity Blues. If you're not familiar with Varsity Blues, it's the story of a backup quarterback who's chosen to lead his football team after the star player's injured. Currently, the film sets at a 6.5 out of 10 on IMDb. But Hunter, what would you rate it?
So I think this movie, again, I don't think we've seen a football movie yet that doesn't suffer from the ragdoll physics tackling that football movies love to pretend that there is in the actual sport, which I don't take off that many points for, again, because it kind of isn't every movie. But this movie suffers a lot from, I think, off the field inaccuracies, which again play into like the kind of theme of the movie, but I think that heavily hurts like the actual like realistic sports side of it. So I bounce back and forth. I think I've got to give it. See, my thinking is like if 5 is just like the bare bones, like half and half inaccuracies and relatively accurate, I just don't think this movie hits that mark even. So I would even say it's lower than I thought I was going to give it. I would give it a 4.5.
I don't think this movie meets the mark at all for me. We were discussing earlier, like I said, maybe a 6, but I would set closer to like a 5, actually. We sat on the film a little bit for a couple days to kind of just process everything. I think for me, especially, like most sports films, and especially high school sports films, this movie does fall victim to casting inappropriate actors to play high schoolers.
I mean, they cast adults as kids, just saying, like,
yeah.
And it's very obvious. And before we get into talking about that, let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way. Oh man, there was an Aggie that took part somewhere in this development of this movie, and if they didn't, I would be thoroughly surprised. Because for one, Wes Cannon's fight song is the War Hymn, and their coach, Bud Kilmer, is quite obviously tried to be portrayed as an Aggie, or they were alluding to some kind of symbolism there, because like first couple shots in the movie, he holds up his hand, and like all you see is his hand, and there's a big gold ring on his hand, which again could obviously be one of his 2 state championships.
About that scene that it can possibly allude to, you and I were cracking jokes that he kept his right hand up a little bit too long and a little bit too straight, like a dictator, and I was like, man, that's kind of like Hitler. And then as the film progresses, he rules his team like a dictator. But I digress.
Yeah, I was talking about the Aggie stuff. That got a lot deeper than my pay cut is. But I mean, like, again, there was some funny Aggie allusions there. I mean, of course, also Olin Buchanan from Texags is in the movie. Kind of flashbanged me for a little bit, but that was just a funny, interesting thing, especially because it's set in West Canaan, Texas, which isn't real, but Canaan, Texas is. So.
But another interesting question would be to ask is, what if it wasn't made by an Aggie, but instead someone from Austin who portrays an Aggie in such a bad light? Because you don't know unless you know, you know?
The plot thickens. But in terms of the actual movie, instead of, we're a movie review podcast, not a conspiracy theory podcast. We'll save that for the others. But it just inaccurately... So, now, don't get me wrong. Everything's bigger in Texas, including high school football. But the ways that the team and their antics are portrayed is, oh man, like I don't care how much you love college football, you would have to be almost in essence like in a cult to let the kids do what they do in this movie.
I absolutely agree with you. So there's several scenes that really, really rub me wrong about this film, which just contributed none whatsoever to the plot. So of course, most of the varsity football team, they're upperclassmen, they're seniors, most of them are 18. But there's several parts of the film where they're going to do very adult activities, like going to strip clubs and going out drinking and buying beer.
And with that, and I kind of thought of this recently. So they make kind of the joke, because their teacher is a stripper, right? They make kind of the joke that, like, oh, Miss Davis, like, one of them says, like, you know, I'm 18, like, I'm legal, which is true, and I guess legally fine. I don't know the ethics and morals behind that, but there, one of the other scenes where Tweeter steals the cop car butt-ass naked and drives around with 3 girls, he specifically notes that one of them, when they go to find Mox at the gas station, is a sophomore, which would in turn be illegal.
Yeah, and
So
also when it comes to just, like, disciplining, like, the actual, like, really, really out there football players, especially Tweeter, like, the football coach, like, overhears, like, the sheriff's talking about it at a bar. It's like, oh, are my boys too much for you to handle? Like, what?
yeah, they're stealing our cars.
Next will be stealing our guns.
Yeah, they're stealing our cars.
And even when the police do show up to, like, their post-football game, like, after parties, and everyone is still drinking in front of the officers, they do nothing to reprimand these teenagers. Instead, just say, oh, we're just trying to make sure no one's driving.
Yeah, which again is trying to kind of reflect how much of, like, how big football is in West Canaan, that, you know, they're, like, above the law essentially if you play high school football, which, I mean, like, trope wise, I guess, but, like, this town, if this is the legacy that, like, West Canaan football is, this town would be a lawless wasteland, like, anarchistic society if you got to essentially do whatever you want and control essentially the entire town as a high school football player. Can you imagine the ego that would give, and how much power a high school football player would, like, how much injustice would go down? It is like, there would be no way this town would even still be standing.
And to that, I return to our strip club scene, where, honestly, there's, like, a distasteful amount of nudity. It does not contribute to the plot whatsoever. It just feels very out of place. Like, you can tell this scene specifically was very much written by a man. Like, I would say for all of the women in this film, even for Mox's girlfriend, nothing but objects. They're accessories. Yeah. They're purely accessories. And I feel like that's just such a degrading theme that you see way too much in sports films. Way too socially accepted.
Yeah, and it kind of suffers from the early 2000s, like, late 90s kind of mindset where, like, the sports movies aren't for the women kind of thing. You know, you got big trucks and titties and football.
Beer.
Yeah, and beer. You got all those things.
But another thing that, sorry, I keep coming back to this, but one thing that is so upsetting about this strip club scene is that, okay, for starters, you're in a small town where apparently high school football is so rampant that the entire city is showing out for games, which, of course, really does not happen.
No.
People don't care about high school football that much, unless you're drunk and you're a parent. But these 18-year-olds go to this club. Apparently, no one knows who they are, not enough to ID them, willingly gives them drinks, you know, and, like, people just leave them alone, and, like, nothing happens.
Yeah. Not to mention the logistics of it. So, okay, I'm going to give you a breakdown here. They are, if they're high school football players, they were out drinking the night before the game. Games are played on Fridays. So that means that, A, they were out on a Thursday night at the strip club till 7 in the morning when school has started. Also, the stripper is one of their teachers. So did she miss school? Or did she get off work at like 3, 4, and go home, sleep for 5 hours, and then go to school? Like, there's a lot of logistical issues with this, and you can tell that while they were trying to use that scene to like make it like, oh, you know, that's the reason they lost the game because they were all hungover and like high on their ego, blah blah blah. Like, you can tell it felt kind of shoehorned in, and like, yeah, like you said, just not essential to the plot. But I digress. We should probably move away from the strip club scene.
Man, you want to talk about shoehorning though? The main character feels shoehorned, of course. Like, it opens with, like, oh, for little kids being best buddies, playing Pee-wee football, right? But for, like, the first good part of the film, Mox does not feel like the main character. He feels like he just comes in so randomly. And the way he carries himself as a character is so stupid and frustrating. Like, I do not sympathize with him whatsoever. After his friend gets injured, after he finally gets his shot, like, by the end of the film, most of the characters are still static. They've not developed. I'd say the biggest character development that we have is with Julie Harbour, who plays a sexy blonde senior, of course, who tries to seduce Mox after her boyfriend is the star quarterback and gets injured and can no longer play. So she's just trying to find a way to get out of town, find a boy that has a full ride, go places, be somewhere outside of their small city, right? The closest that we have to character development with her is that by the end of the film, she's a pretty girl who works hard and wears glasses and carries books. That's about where we are.
Which, I mean, I appreciate the like understanding of like the like representing the group of people who are always trying to leave their hometowns. I think that's like a good like it kind of shows a dichotomy between the town itself, because everyone there is like, they're all quite literally all peaked in high schoolers. Like, they all peaked playing high school football, and that was where they capped. So it was good to see that dichotomy, but yeah, the character development was kind of slow and non-existent in some parts. Also, back to the football side of things. No quarterback is getting offered from a small 3A school, a small 3A West Canaan, Texas. No school is offering them on the scale that Florida State in the 90s is offering him. That would be like, for reference, that would be like Georgia offering, man, I can't even name like a 3A school in Texas. It is like, that is, you would have to be the greatest to ever do it. It would be so hard to even get noticed. And then even after that, you would have to put up more than above average. Like, you would have to put up legendary numbers to even get that kind of recognition, because the quality of competition you're playing against is just like, it's non-existent. And so that was something that was like Lance, like, I know he's like the star quarterback, he's committed to Florida State. Oh,
It's not happening.
yeah, it's not happening. I just don't see it happening. That's just a little beef I had. He may be the greatest thing to ever do it, but I don't see it happening.
The only single part of this film I have peace with is Lance Harbour. His character, solid, great character. If only the film had him as a main character instead of flip-flopping between Mox.
Rest in peace,
Mox
Paul
is
Walker.
so undeserving. Yeah, I would say Lance, portrayed by Paul Walker, may he rest in peace. That was maybe the one redeeming thing this film had.
Him becoming a coach at the end, that was super fun.
That could in itself just been the story.
Yeah. But it wasn't.
But it wasn't, and that's why I'm happy to say this is a set of 5 for me.
Gave us some Varsity Blues.
Now looking at the cast, we're more like Varsity Who's.
I mean, they got John Voight in there, Paul Walker.
Yeah. But just remember that if you're gonna play the game, you gotta act the part. And clearly, Varsity Blues did not. But we see y'all next week. Thanks so much. Bye.